My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 52 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I understood exactly who my wife was. Funny thing about betrayal, it doesn't arrive like thunder. It slips into your house quietly. It sits at your dinner table. It kisses you goodnight while planning something else behind your back. And sometimes, it starts with a single text message glowing on a kitchen counter while the woman you trusted is upstairs washing another man's scent off her skin. The night everything cracked open, rain hammered against the windows hard enough to shake the glass. I'd just gotten home from another 12-hour shift at the steel plant outside Columbus. My shoulders ached, my hands smelled like grease and iron, and all I wanted was silence. The house was dark except for the yellow kitchen light Emily always left on for me. 24 years of marriage teaches you routines like religion. Her purse on the chair. Her vanilla candle burning near the sink. Her voice upstairs humming softly through the running shower. Normal. Familiar. That's what made the message feel like a knife instead of a warning. Her phone buzzed beside the fruit bowl. Then again. I ignored it at first. I'm not the jealous type. Never was. I trusted my wife in the kind of complete way only hardworking fools do. But then the screen lit up again, and the words appeared right there in front of me. I miss your kisses already. My stomach dropped so fast it felt physical. Like missing a step in the dark. I stared at the screen while rain rattled the windows behind me. There was a small red heart under the message. Whoever sent it wasn't hiding. Whoever sent it felt comfortable. That was the part that hurt most. Comfort only comes after repetition. I could hear Emily upstairs moving around the bathroom. Cabinet doors opening. Water shutting off. My brain started reaching for excuses before my heart could process the truth. Wrong number. Joke from a friend. Maybe something innocent twisted into something ugly by timing. But deep down, I already knew. Men always know before they admit it. My hands felt strangely calm when I picked up the phone. Too calm. That scared me more than anger would've. I opened the message. No name saved. Just a number. I typed slowly. Come over. My husband won't be home until midnight. Then I hit send. For a second, the whole kitchen went silent except for the refrigerator humming behind me. I placed the phone back exactly where it had been and leaned against the counter trying to breathe normally. Upstairs, Emily laughed softly at something on her podcast, completely unaware her entire life had just shifted beneath her feet. 10 minutes. That's all it took. 10 minutes for 24 years to become something else. The doorbell rang once. Confident. Not nervous. Not hesitant. Whoever stood outside expected to be welcomed in. I walked toward the door feeling each heartbeat in my throat. My reflection moved across the dark hallway mirror beside me, older than I remembered. Gray around the beard. Tired eyes. The face of a man who spent his whole life building things for other people. I opened the door. And standing there beneath the porch light was Marcus Reed. 58 years old. Retired police captain. Church elder. My mentor. The man who stood beside me at my father's funeral 6 years earlier while I cried into his shoulder. He held a bottle of red wine in one hand and smiled the second he saw me. That smile disappeared almost instantly. The color drained from his face so fast it looked painful. Ethan, he said quietly. Not fear. Recognition. Like he understood immediately that the game was over. We stared at each other while rainwater dripped from the edge of the roof between us. Neither of us moved. Then something strange happened. I didn't explode. I didn't swing at him. I didn't scream. The rage inside me turned cold instead. Controlled. Precise. That's worse. Men like Marcus understand anger. They know how to fight it. But coldness? Coldness terrifies people. You should come in, I said calmly. His eyes flickered past me into the house. Calculating. Looking for escape routes already. I think there's been some misunderstanding, he said carefully. Funny how liars always use the same words. Misunderstanding. Confusion. Context. Like betrayal is some complicated math problem instead of a choice. I stepped aside slowly. Come inside, Marcus. He hesitated only a second before walking past me. The smell of expensive cologne filled the hallway. Emily's favorite kind. That realization hit harder than the text itself. Upstairs, footsteps approached. Then Emily appeared at the top of the staircase wearing gray sweatpants and one of my old college hoodies. I nodded slowly. Frank swallowed hard. Then he said the words that changed everything. "Come with me," he murmured. "You need to see this yourself." I looked back once before stepping outside. Emily stood frozen near the staircase, clutching the sleeves of my hoodie like she was trying to hold herself together. Marcus stayed near the kitchen counter, eyes narrowed now, watching Frank carefully. That bothered me immediately. It wasn't confusion on his face. It was recognition. And when a guilty man recognizes danger before you do, you pay attention. Rain hit cold against my face as I stepped onto the porch. Frank kept glancing over his shoulder toward the driveway like he was afraid someone had followed him. Up close, he looked worse than I remembered. Deep bags under his eyes. Hands trembling slightly. Water dripping from the brim of his old security cap. "What is this about?" I asked quietly. Frank swallowed hard before answering. "Not here." He looked past me again into the house. "You got somewhere private?" I almost laughed at that. There was nothing private left in my life anymore. But something in his expression stopped me. Fear like that doesn't come from gossip. It comes from seeing something you wish you hadn't. I grabbed my truck keys from the hallway table without saying another word. Emily stepped forward immediately. "Ethan, where are you going?" she asked. I didn't answer her. Marcus finally spoke again, calm voice returning like he thought he could regain control if he sounded reasonable enough. "You shouldn't disappear right now," he said. "We need to handle this like adults." I turned toward him slowly. "Adults?" I repeated. "You were sleeping with my wife while praying over my dinner table." His jaw tightened for the first time that night. But I wanted him uncomfortable. Frank stayed silent beside the door until I walked outside with him into the rain. We climbed into my F-150, and for a few seconds neither of us spoke. Windshield wipers dragged slowly across the glass while thunder rolled somewhere over the city. Finally, Frank reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a wrinkled envelope. "I didn't know who else to take this to," he said. "But after what I saw tonight, you deserve the truth." My chest tightened instantly. He handed me a stack of printed photographs. Grainy security images. Black and white. Timestamps in the corners. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then my stomach turned. Emily's car. Parked outside a storage facility on the east side nearly every Thursday night for 7 months. Marcus's SUV parked beside it. Different dates. Different weeks. Same pattern. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the last photo. Marcus and Emily standing beside Unit 214 with another man I'd never seen before. Expensive suit. Silver watch. They were handing him folders. Thick ones. Documents. Frank watched my face carefully while I flipped through the pictures again. "Who's the third guy?" I asked. Frank rubbed his jaw nervously. "Name's Victor Hale. Real estate investor. Comes around sometimes. Quiet guy. But those three," he shook his head slowly, "they met there a lot." My heartbeat started thudding harder now. Not because of the affair anymore. Something else. Something colder. "Why were you watching them?" I asked. Frank hesitated before answering. "Because your wife asked questions about your life insurance policy one night." That sentence hit harder than anything so far. "What?" Frank nodded grimly. "About 4 months ago. She thought nobody was around. She was talking to Marcus outside the units. I heard her ask how long payouts usually take after accidental death claims. The air inside the truck suddenly felt too small. Too hot. "You sure?" I whispered. "I'm old, not deaf," Frank said. After that, I started paying attention. I stared at the photographs again while rain hammered the roof above us. My brain replayed the last year differently now. Emily insisting I renew my insurance policy through Marcus's financial contact. Marcus encouraging me to take fewer shifts because stress kills men faster than age. Emily suddenly caring whether my truck brakes had been checked. Tiny things. Tiny harmless things. Until they weren't harmless anymore. Frank leaned closer. "That's not all." He reached into the envelope again and handed me photocopies of documents. My name sat across the top of every page. Property transfers. Power of attorney drafts. Retirement account revisions. I recognized Marcus's signature as witness on half of them. My vision blurred for a second. These aren't finalized, Frank said carefully. But they were preparing something. I felt physically sick. Not heartbreak anymore. Betrayal had evolved into calculation. Planning. Strategy. Emily wasn't just cheating. They were building a future using pieces of my life. Maybe even preparing for a version of that future without me in it. Why bring this to me now? I asked quietly. Frank looked down at his hands. Because my son died 10 years ago after trusting the wrong people. His voice cracked slightly. And I promised myself if I ever saw something bad coming again, I wouldn't stay quiet. For a long moment, the only sound between us was rain. Then I asked the question sitting deepest in my chest. Do you think they were planning to kill me? Frank didn't answer immediately. That scared me more than if he had. Finally, he looked at me and said, I think greedy people stop seeing others as human after enough money gets involved. Cold spread through my body slowly. Controlled. Dangerous. Back at the house, the kitchen lights still glowed through the rain-streaked windows. My wife and my mentor were inside, probably trying to figure out what I knew. The old version of me would have stormed back in demanding answers. But that man was gone now. Frank noticed the change in my face instantly. What are you gonna do? He asked carefully. I leaned back against the seat staring at my house. 24 years inside those walls. Birthdays. Christmas mornings. Hospital visits. Arguments. Laughter. All poison now. Nothing tonight, I said finally. That's what dangerous men do wrong. They react too fast. Frank nodded slowly like he approved. I looked down again at the photographs. Then one detail caught my eye. In the background of one image near the storage unit was a black sedan. Partial license plate visible. I frowned. Who's that? Frank leaned closer. No idea. But that car showed up every time Victor Hale did. My instincts sharpened instantly. Another player. Another witness. Or another threat. I folded the photographs carefully and slid them back into the envelope. Then I started the truck. You got somewhere safe to stay tonight? Asked Frank. He looked surprised. Yeah. Why? Because if they realize you talked to me, I said quietly, you might become a problem they want to erase too. That landed hard. His face went pale. You really think these people are capable of that? I stared at my house one last time before pulling away from the curb. I think, I said slowly, I married someone I don't know at all. I drove for nearly an hour through rain-slick roads without destination. My thoughts kept circling the same horrifying realization. Affairs are emotional. But paperwork? Financial transfers? Insurance questions? That's planning. Methodical planning. And suddenly every conversation from the last year sounded different in my memory. Emily encouraging me to work overtime. Marcus asking detailed questions about my retirement account during counseling sessions. Victor Hale appearing out of nowhere connected to property investments. It wasn't random. It was organized. Around midnight, I parked outside an all-night diner near the interstate. Old neon sign buzzing overhead. Empty parking lot except for a delivery truck and a motorcycle near the entrance. I ordered coffee I never drank and spread the documents across the booth table. The waitress kept glancing at me because my expression probably looked half dead by then. That's when my phone buzzed. Emily. I let it ring. Then another message arrived. Please come home. We need to talk before you misunderstand everything. I almost smiled at that. Misunderstand. There's that word again. I typed back slowly. Funny thing about truth, Emily. Once you see enough of it, everything starts making sense. 3 dots appeared instantly like she was typing back fast. Then stopped. Then started again. Finally, one message came through. What did Frank tell you? I froze staring at the screen. My wife wasn't asking if I was okay. Wasn't asking where I was. She was scared of what I knew. That told me everything. A shadow moved near the diner window. I looked up casually and saw a black sedan pulling into the parking lot across the street. My chest tightened immediately. Partial plate visible beneath rainwater. Same car from the photographs. The engine stayed running. Headlights off. Watching. Waiting. And sitting behind the wheel was Marcus Reed. The moment I saw Marcus sitting inside that black sedan across the street, something inside me became perfectly still. Not fear. Not panic. Clarity. The kind men get right before a fistfight or a car crash, when the world suddenly sharpens and every sound becomes painfully clear. Rain tapped against the diner windows while neon light flickered across the wet parking lot. Marcus stayed motionless behind the steering wheel, engine idling, cigarette ember glowing faintly in the dark. He wasn't there by accident. He'd followed me. Which meant one thing for certain. Whatever Emily and Marcus were hiding, it was bigger than an affair. I lowered my phone slowly and pretended not to notice him. Across from me, the untouched coffee had gone cold. My hands rested beside the stack of photocopied documents Frank gave me earlier. Insurance forms. Property drafts. Account revisions. The deeper I looked, the uglier it became. And now Marcus was watching me from across the street like a man trying to decide how dangerous I'd become. My phone buzzed again. Emily. Ethan, please answer me. I need to explain before you do something stupid. I stared at that message for several seconds. Before you do something stupid. Funny choice of words. Not before you get hurt. Not before we lose our marriage. She was afraid of consequences now. That meant I finally had leverage. I typed carefully. You lied to me for months. Start explaining. Her response came instantly this time. It isn't what you think. Victor pressured us. Marcus was helping protect you. I actually laughed under my breath. There it was again. Half-truths wrapped in concern. Manipulation disguised as panic. But one detail mattered. Victor pressured us. That meant Victor Hale wasn't just some investor. He was connected to whatever scheme they'd built around me. Outside, Marcus finally stepped out of the sedan. Rain hit his coat as he crossed the empty street toward the diner entrance. Calm look. Controlled face. Same posture he used at church gatherings and funerals. Men trusted Marcus because he knew how to look safe. I gathered the documents slowly before he entered. The little bell above the diner door chimed softly when he walked in. The waitress looked up, smiled automatically, then sensed the tension and disappeared toward the kitchen. Marcus stopped beside my booth without sitting down immediately. You should have answered your wife, he said quietly. You should have stayed away from my wife, I replied. His jaw flexed once. Small crack in the mask. He slid into the booth across from me. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. Rain hammered outside harder now, wrapping the diner in white noise. Finally, Marcus leaned forward slightly. Frank talked too much. That sounds like concern, I said. Or a threat. It's advice. I studied him carefully. 20 years older than me, but still solid. Former cop. Respected church elder. The kind of man juries believe instantly. I realized then how carefully this whole thing had been designed. If anything happened to me, Marcus would have guided the narrative himself. Tragic stress. Overworked husband. Financial confusion. Maybe depression. He'd stand beside Emily during the funeral comforting her while quietly helping her inherit my entire life. The thought nearly made me sick. How long? I asked flatly. Marcus exhaled slowly. The affair started 8 months ago. Hearing him say it aloud hurt more than I expected. 8 months of lies sitting across from me at breakfast. 8 months of pretending. And Victor? Marcus rubbed his hands together once before answering. Victor approached Emily about the property. What property? Your land. My eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? The county rezoning project. He watched my reaction carefully. The city's planning a commercial expansion near your neighborhood. Victor found out before it became public. Your property value is going to triple. My chest tightened instantly. 3 years ago, I inherited 12 acres outside Columbus from my father. Land I refused to sell because it carried memories. fishing ponds, old oak trees. My dad's workshop still standing near the creek. The waitress looked up, smiled automatically, then sensed the tension and disappeared toward the kitchen. Marcus stopped beside my booth without sitting down immediately. "You should have answered your wife," he said quietly. "You should have stayed away from my wife," I replied. His jaw flexed once. Small crack in the mask. He slid into the booth across from me. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. Rain hammered outside harder now, wrapping the diner in white noise. Finally, Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Frank talked too much." "That sounds like concern," I said. "Or a threat." "It's advice." I studied him carefully. 20 years older than me, but still solid. Former cop. Respected church elder. The kind of man juries believe instantly. I realized then how carefully this whole thing had been designed. If anything happened to me, Marcus would have guided the narrative himself. Tragic stress. Overworked husband. Financial confusion. Maybe depression. He'd stand beside Emily during the funeral, comforting her while quietly helping her inherit my entire life. The thought nearly made me sick. "How long?" I asked flatly. Marcus exhaled slowly. "The affair started 8 months ago." Hearing him say it aloud hurt more than I expected. 8 months of lies sitting across from me at breakfast. 8 months of pretending. "And Victor?" Marcus rubbed his hands together once before answering. "Victor approached Emily about the property." "What property?" "Your land." My eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "The county rezoning project." He watched my reaction carefully. "The city's planning a commercial expansion near your neighborhood. Victor found out before it became public. Your property value is going to triple." My chest tightened instantly. 3 years ago, I inherited 12 acres outside Columbus from my father. Land I refused to sell because it carried memories. Fishing ponds. Old oak trees. My dad's workshop still standing near the creek. Emily hated that property because I spent weekends restoring it instead of taking vacations. Suddenly every argument about selling the land sounded different in my memory. "You were trying to get me to transfer ownership," I realized. Marcus didn't deny it. Victor wanted control before the announcement became public. "So you seduced my wife?" His eyes hardened slightly. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." I leaned back slowly. "That's the part you regret?" Silence. "Answer enough." Marcus lowered his voice. "Victor plays rough, Ethan. Once Emily got involved, things spiraled. You need to understand something. Nobody planned to hurt you." I pulled the insurance documents from the envelope and slid them across the table. "Then explain these." For the first time that night, Marcus looked genuinely unsettled. His eyes flicked across the pages quickly before returning to me. "You don't understand what you're looking at." "Try me." He hesitated too long. Victor prepared backup options. Backup options. My blood turned cold again. "You mean if I refused to sign?" Marcus said nothing. Outside, thunder cracked across the sky so loudly the diner windows rattled. I stared at the man sitting across from me and realized something terrifying. Marcus might have started this for greed. Emily might have started it for excitement or resentment or money. But Victor Hale? Victor sounded like the kind of man who treated people like obstacles. And obstacles get removed. Marcus leaned closer suddenly. "Listen carefully to me," he said. "Victor thinks you know less than you actually do. Keep it that way." "Why would you warn me?" "Because whatever else happened, Emily does care about you." I nearly lost control then. Not screaming. Worse. Laughing. Care. I whispered. "She brought another man into my house." Marcus's expression darkened. "You think I'm proud of this? I think you enjoyed it." That landed. His face tightened hard for half a second before control returned. There was. Truth always flashes through people before they hide it again. I realized then something important. Marcus wasn't fully loyal to Victor anymore. Fear had entered the equation, which meant cracks were forming. And cracks are where revenge begins. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Emily. A known number. One message. "You should stop digging before someone gets hurt." Marcus saw my expression instantly. What? I turned the phone toward him. He read the message and went completely still. That wasn't me, he said immediately. I believed him. Which made it worse. Because now we both knew Victor was watching too. Marcus stood abruptly and looked out the diner window into the storm. You need to leave town for a few days. Not happening. He turned back sharply. Ethan, this stopped being about marriage the second Victor got involved. Then maybe Victor picked the wrong man. Marcus stared at me for several long seconds. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded keycard. Storage Unit 214. There are copies of everything in there, he said quietly. Contracts. Transfer drafts. Audio recordings. Victor keeps insurance on everyone he works with. I frowned. Why give me this? Rainwater dripped from his coat onto the diner floor while he answered. Because Victor doesn't leave loose ends. For the first time all night, Marcus Reed looked afraid. Real fear. Not guilt. Not shame. Survival fear. And suddenly I understood the truth. Marcus wasn't the mastermind. He was trapped too. Maybe not innocent, but trapped. He slid the keycard toward me. If you go after Victor directly, you'll lose. Then how do I win? Marcus looked out toward the dark highway again before answering. You make him believe he already has. Then he walked out into the rain without another word. I sat frozen in the booth long after he disappeared. The waitress finally approached carefully. You okay, honey? She asked softly. I looked down at the storage keycard in my hand. Then at the threatening text message still glowing on my screen. Then at the photographs of my wife standing beside men who planned to steal my life. No, I said honestly. But I think I'm getting closer. Around 2 a.m., I drove toward the storage facility on the east side. Rain had stopped by then, leaving the streets slick and empty beneath orange streetlights. My heartbeat stayed steady the entire drive. That surprised me. Maybe because pain eventually burns itself into purpose. Unit 214 sat near the back fence exactly where the photographs showed. Dark metal door. Rust near the lock. Silence all around except distant traffic. I inserted the keycard carefully and pulled the door open. Then I stopped breathing for a second. Inside the storage unit were dozens of file boxes stacked against the walls. Filing cabinets. Computer equipment. And pinned across one entire corkboard were photographs of me. Me leaving work. Me at the grocery store. Me outside my father's property. Schedules. Financial notes. Insurance details. Every piece of my life mapped out like a target. And in the center of the board, attached with a red thumbtack, was a printed document titled, Final Asset Transfer After Event. Footsteps sounded behind me suddenly. Slow. Deliberate. I turned instantly. A tall man stepped from the darkness near the neighboring units wearing a black coat and silver watch. Victor Hale smiled faintly beneath the parking lot lights. Mr. Cole, he said calmly, you've become much more complicated than expected. Victor Hale looked exactly like the kind of man who ruins lives professionally. Calm eyes. Expensive coat. Not a wrinkle anywhere on him despite the damp night air. The silver watch on his wrist probably cost more than my first truck. He stood there beside storage unit 214 like he owned the darkness itself. And maybe he thought he did. Behind me, the unit remained open, exposing the wall full of photographs and documents tracking nearly every detail of my life. My routines. My finances. My insurance policy. Even medical notes from my back injury years earlier. Seeing all of it together made one thing brutally clear. This was never just betrayal. It was hunting. Victor stepped closer slowly, hands visible, voice calm enough to sound almost friendly. You shouldn't have come alone, he said. I stared at him without moving. Funny, I replied. I was thinking the same thing about you. A faint smile touched his mouth. Marcus always said you were smarter than people assumed. Hearing Marcus's name now felt strange. 3 hours earlier I wanted to destroy him. But standing there in front of Victor, I finally understood the hierarchy. Marcus was weak. Emily was selfish. Victor was dangerous. There's a difference. Dangerous people don't cheat because they're unhappy. They cheat because they enjoy control. You manipulated my wife, I said flatly. Victor shrugged slightly. Your wife manipulated herself. I simply gave her opportunities. Rage flared hot in my chest then, but I forced it back down. Men like Victor survive because they provoke emotional reactions. They count on anger making other people sloppy. I looked past him toward the dark parking lot. You following me all night? Monitoring risk, he corrected smoothly. You became unpredictable after Frank interfered. Frank told me enough. Victor sighed almost sadly. Frank saw fragments and imagined monsters. He stepped into the storage unit beside me and casually glanced at the evidence lining the walls. You know what ruins most men, Ethan? He asked quietly. Not greed. They refuse to admit when someone smarter outplays them. I nearly smiled at that because Victor still believed he controlled the board. That was his weakness. Arrogance always blinds men eventually. I looked toward the corkboard again. Final asset transfer after event. What event? I asked. Victor didn't answer immediately. He picked up one of the folders instead and flipped through it casually. Your father's land sits directly inside the new interstate expansion zone, he said. Within 18 months, developers will pay millions for that acreage. I already knew that part now. So you tried convincing me to sell. We tried many things. He finally looked at me directly. But sentimental men are difficult. I thought about Emily then. All those arguments over the property. All those nights she accused me of caring more about dead memories than our future. I used to think those fights came from frustration. Now I understood they came from impatience. The insurance policy was backup, I said quietly. Victor tilted his head slightly. You're asking questions you already know answers to. That was close enough to confirmation. Coldness spread through me again. Not shock anymore. Just acceptance of how evil people can become once money outweighs conscience. Did Emily know? I asked. Victor studied me carefully before responding. Not fully. Something about the way he answered told me that was partially true. Emily probably believed she was helping pressure me into selling. Maybe Marcus too. But Victor? Victor had contingency plans ready if pressure failed. And Marcus? I asked. Victor's expression darkened faintly. Marcus became emotionally compromised. There was contempt. Victor despised weakness. The affair stopped being useful once feelings complicated the operation. Suddenly Marcus's fear back at the diner made perfect sense. He realized too late what kind of man he'd attached himself to. Victor closed the folder calmly and placed it back onto the table. Here's what's going to happen now, he said. You're going to walk away from this unit. You're going to go home. And tomorrow morning you're going to sign the preliminary land agreements willingly. I laughed softly under my breath. Or what? Victor's eyes hardened for the first time. Or difficult situations become tragic ones very quickly. Silence filled the storage unit. Wind rattled somewhere outside against the metal fencing. Victor stared at me like a man accustomed to obedience. But something had changed inside me tonight. Fear only controls you before betrayal strips everything away. After that, men become unpredictable. You made one mistake, I said quietly. Victor raised an eyebrow. Only one. You assumed I came here alone. That tiny flicker across his face told me everything. Before he could respond, headlights exploded across the storage facility parking lot. Multiple vehicles turning in fast. Tires crunching gravel. Doors slamming hard. Victor spun instantly toward the entrance just as voices echoed through the darkness. Federal agents. Don't move. Victor's face changed completely then. Not panic. Worse. Calculation collapsing in real time. 2 FBI agents rushed the unit with weapons drawn while more officers surrounded the neighboring rows. Red and blue lights flashed violently across the wet pavement outside. Victor slowly raised his hands, but his eyes locked onto mine with pure hatred now. You arrogant son of a bitch, he muttered. I stepped closer calmly. Marcus wasn't the only one who keeps backups. 3 hours earlier, after Marcus left the diner, I hadn't gone straight to the storage unit. First, I made one phone call. Denise Harrow, the divorce attorney. Turns out Denise's brother works federal financial crimes. Once I mentioned forged property transfers, insurance manipulation, and illegal rezoning leaks involving Victor Hale's investment group, people became very interested very fast. Especially after Frank handed over copies of everything he secretly photographed for months. Victor suddenly lunged sideways toward the filing cabinets, but agents slammed him against the wall instantly. Papers scattered everywhere across the concrete floor. One folder burst open beside my boots, revealing lists of names. Other families. Other properties. Other targets. My stomach turned, realizing Emily and Marcus were never unique. Victor ran this scheme professionally. Seduce vulnerable spouses. Manipulate financially struggling families. Acquire valuable land quietly before public development announcements. And when persuasion failed, insurance policies appeared. One agent lifted the document labeled Final Asset Transfer after event and looked toward his partner grimly. Jesus, he muttered. Victor finally stopped resisting. Breathing hard now. Eyes dead cold. You think you won? He asked me quietly while agents cuffed him. I looked around the storage unit one final time. All the surveillance photos. All the lies. All the plans built around destroying my life piece by piece. Then I looked him directly in the eye. No, I said calmly. I think you lost. They escorted Victor out into flashing police lights moments later. Rain started falling again softly across the pavement while agents continued searching the unit. One of them approached me near the entrance. You're lucky, she said quietly. Another month and this could have gone very differently. But, funny word. Nothing about tonight felt lucky. My marriage was ashes. My trust was dead. And the woman I loved helped strangers map out my destruction. But standing there under the cold rain, I realized something important. Survival itself is revenge when people expected your collapse. Around sunrise, I finally drove home. The house looked smaller somehow. Weaker. Emily's car sat in the driveway alone. Lights still on inside. She opened the front door before I even reached it. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Makeup gone. Fear replacing every ounce of confidence she carried earlier that night. Where have you been? She whispered. I walked past her into the kitchen slowly. Same kitchen where this nightmare started. Same fruit bowl. Same counter. Different life. Victor's under arrest, I said quietly. The color drained from her face instantly. She grabbed the edge of the counter to steady herself. What? The FBI raided the storage facility. Tears filled her eyes immediately. Real tears this time. Not manipulation. Ethan, I swear to God I didn't know everything. I believe that part. But partial innocence still leaves blood on your hands. How much did you know? I asked. She broke then. Completely. Sliding into the kitchen chair, crying so hard she could barely breathe. I thought he just wanted the land, she whispered. Marcus said if we pressured you enough you'd finally sell it and we could start over somewhere else. I stared at her silently. And the affair? Her face crumpled harder. I don't even know how it happened anymore. But I did. Affairs don't begin in bedrooms. They begin in resentment. In selfishness. In tiny betrayals people excuse until they become monsters. She looked up at me with desperate eyes. Do you hate me? I thought about that carefully. 24 years together. Birthdays. Funerals. Children. Hospital rooms. Late night talks. All poisoned now by greed and lies. But hate requires passion. And somewhere between the text message and the storage unit, something inside me simply emptied out. No, I answered honestly. That would mean you still matter enough. That hurt her more than screaming ever could. I walked upstairs slowly while she cried downstairs alone. The morning sun began rising through the bedroom windows, pale and cold. I opened the closet and started packing a bag calmly. Not because I was leaving my life behind. Because I was finally taking it back. 2 months later, Marcus Reed pleaded guilty to fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction. Victor Hale faced federal charges tied to multiple property schemes across 3 states. Frank Delaney received official commendation for cooperating with investigators. And Emily? Emily moved into a small apartment across town after signing divorce papers she could barely look at. Last week she sent me a text saying she still thinks about me every day. I never replied. Some endings don't need words. This morning, I stood alone on my father's land watching sunlight break across the trees near the creek. Cold air. Quiet water. The same land they tried stealing from me. Funny thing about revenge, people think it's rage. Screaming. Destruction. But the best revenge is colder than that. It survives.